Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
No, I'll do the intro.
Oh, okay.
You are live.
We're live. Okay. Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the Sacred. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. And like I said, this is an episode of the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio, Studio B, and our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as the Mad King. And I may be pronouncing this wrong. Our guest is Stefan Malecek. And
thank you.
Malecek?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And my computer decided to do an update, so I can't read Stefan's bio, but we are over here in Maui, Hawaii, and we're at a coronavirus, what do they call it? Shelter in place, and we are just stay at home, and if we violate any of the rules, it is punishable as a misdemeanor with fines of up to $5,000 and up to a year in jail or both, and that's here in Maui County. So we're living in very interesting times right now. Sasha, would you like to say anything? Did you get to read up about Stefan? Okay, so tell us about yourself. Who are you? I know you're well known in the community. You're part of the Mankind Project, and you're a therapist.
Retired. Yeah, retired. I take occasion. I take occasional referrals.
Occasional referrals, yes.
Yes.
And what kind of therapy do you do? What kind of counseling do you do?
Well, it's a little hard to define, but mostly, I work with trauma survivors. For 5 years, I worked with the VA in Oregon as a contract therapist, working with 100% PTSD vets, and I also had a lot of clients from the local hospitals, ER techs, EMTs, etc. So mostly trauma work and mostly in trauma recovery. So the point being that essentially, I'm getting a little broken noise in the background. So if you can't hear me, let me know.
Okay, no, we can hear you fine. Sasha, turn off that overhead lamp, the fan, because that would make one of our fans sounds like a bird. So we'll turn that off. It's hot. Maui is hot, people.
It is that.
Yeah.
And it was raining.
Okay, and then I want to listen. Oh, you got rain?
Yeah, it was raining just a little bit ago, and now it's clear again.
What part of the island are you on?
I'm in Haiku.
Okay, we're over in Wai'ehu, Wailuku, so we're on the other side of the island. Hey, Dr. Lessin, come over here. I want you to talk about what you did as well. So Dr. Lessin is retired, and you two have a lot in common. Doctor, where'd you go?
Went all around turning off things.
No, I didn't want them all off, just the one that sounds like a bird. Okay.
I think I got that one.
Okay. Say hi to Stefan, and so you guys can compare notes. So you worked with what kind of clients?
Mostly in Tantra, and my basic methodology is Jungian voice dialogue. I studied with Hal and Sidra Stone for a long time. And so it's such a non-dualistic approach that it's just perfect for me. Basically, I'm an existentialist.
Yes. I actually use voice dialogue quite a bit. I studied / lived with a certified voice dialogue coach for 6 years, and so I've had a lot of exposure, and I use it quite frequently. I love the work. I also do, my own form of shadow work. I'm not at all certified, but I've done lots of shadow work, a lot of hypnotherapy, and it, of course, rubbed off on me.
Great.
It just becomes a habit to realize that whatever you're experiencing, there's the opposite, especially the judgments you have of other people are all just your disowned parts. And once you start thinking this way, the whole world is non-dualistic.
That's right. I completely concur. And, it's a matter of continually integrating old trauma, the affect or the effects of old trauma. And so it's a job that's never done. And I've had, through the years, lots of experience. I worked on psych units for 17 years before I went back to school and started getting degreed. And so I've had quite a lot of experience with a whole variety of different levels of trauma in different situations. I spent 1968-69 in Vietnam and worked as what was called then a social work clinical psychology specialist. I was the setup man for the psychiatrist. I would do all the social history and medical history and psych history and blah blah, and then do a provisional diagnosis in 5 axes, and then the psychiatrist would fly in to some obscure firebase like once a week and do 30 or 40 guys in an afternoon. And so he mainly relied on my expertise and what I had written. So he essentially came in and rubber stamped everything I did. So I got quite a lot of exposure to a lot of different situations and different conditions, including I actually had a client, I had a client member who was there who what's it called? Not Clarenbo's. He actually exhibited that is a fairly rare but obscure syndrome. I can't remember the name of it now. He felt that he was dead, and everybody else was dead. And
yes, I've run into that.
I can't remember what it's called now, just offhand. But so I actually got to experience it. So through the years, my exposure to very extreme situations has always held me in good stead. I'm actually working on. I also write fiction. I'm working on my 7th novel right now, and it's features a pair of twin sisters who have folie à deux. They have a shared delusion, and it's pretty trippy. I'm really having fun with it.
Well, I want to go back to the fellow who believed he was dead. Tell us a little bit more about it. He said everybody else was dead too. I mean, how do we really know we're dead or alive anyway? I mean, I kind of relate to that. But what was he exhibiting?
Well, let's see. A totally flat affect. The main feature, what is it called? I can't remember the name of it. But the main feature is a sense, is a delusional belief that you are not alive. And he came into a battalion 8. How did he come? Oh, he came in on sick call. He came in unannounced to my little office, which was a tent, and immediately started acting as if and talking to as if I were one of his platoon doc. I was his platoon doc. And he said, "They're all dead, Doc. They're all dead." And so we chatted a little bit, and I was very concerned because he was severely, heavily armed, two 45s, an AK-47, boot knives, hand grenades, and
Wow.
then he said,
An arsenal.
yeah. Well, he was a boony soldier, so and he came in and he said, "They're all dead, Doc. They're all dead, and so are you." And I went, "Oh shit, here we go."
Did he have some kind of trauma that started that?
Sure.
Was he in action? Yeah.
Very severe. In fact, he had witnessed the death of his entire platoon. They got ambushed, and he was the only survivor of the ambush. And somehow he managed to find his way to my tent, of all things. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so darn it, this is bothering me. I wish I could remember the name of that syndrome. Anyway,
that's okay.
And so he said, I sat with him for the better part of an hour and a half or so, I imagine. I can't remember. It was sort of one of those timeless encounters, and I just kept trying to. I didn't do any quote reality testing. I didn't challenge his delusions or anything. I just kept talking to him and assuring him that he was safe. And eventually, I talked him into going to battalion aid with me when I assured him that I would go with him. And I told him that the doctors there would be able to help him because this was like way beyond me. And so I walked him over to battalion aid, and I got him to surrender all of his weapons before we went in.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a bit of a work. It was a bit of work, and the doctor who was on call at battalion aid had been somebody who had previously been rather critical of me. And my methods of dealing with people, but I, as soon as I walked in, I just fronted him and I said, "Look, Dr. Rosenthal," I think that was his name, Rosenzweig. Anyway, I remember him very clearly, and I said, "Look, this, I gave him a really quick rundown, and he just looked at me and he said, whatever you say, and." We got him on a stretcher and started some IVs and gave him a big load of Valium, and he ended up getting psychiatrically medevaced to Camp Zama, Japan, I think it was. So that was it was pretty intense. But that was That was rare. I mean,
no, I wasn't threatened like that. I worked. I was a director of counseling for the Waikiki Drug Clinic, and they hired my clinic and to go to the different drug places. And we worked for the Navy. We worked at Pearl Harbor, and I had a program for no uniforms allowed. And all these guys, lay counselors, spent a weekend with me, and then their wives did it, and the Navy paid for all this therapy. And what we found that people's main problem wasn't anything drugs; it was the fact that they were in the military.
Yes.
That was we could get people out because they if they confused if they had severe anger toward someone who raised them that was threatening to break out on their superiors, that's enough to scare the Navy, and we could just say, let him out or he'll hurt somebody.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty much opposite of the Army, man. The Army said, as long as they can breathe, put them back online. I used to argue, well, pretty much. I mean, I used to argue with, company commanders and XOs and stuff all the time. This man needs care. He needs to be offline. Oh no, is he still breathing? Put him online. It completely ignored, almost completely ignored psychiatric symptoms totally. Oh, by the way, Cotard's Cotard's Delusion. That's the name.
There it is.
Cotard's Delusion. I just remembered it.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had, because when we did therapy with the guys, we get all the, this one guy, his buddies caught out, they kept taking the same hill and then having to go back down to their base and so forth. And his best friend got caught in no man's land, and nobody could rescue him. And the Kong didn't kill him; they just left him there, and so forth. Yeah. So later on, they're taking this guy Tommy. He's taken a prisoner back, and he was a Kong suspect in the helicopter. And the guy tried to be friendly and point to his picture of his wife in his pocket or something, and Tommy threw him out of the helicopter, and nobody reported him. Nobody said shit. But it haunted my, that was my patient, the guy the other guy. Yeah. He was haunted.
They used to call it 1,000-foot interrogations.
Mm.
Yeah.
You take a guy up, take a bunch of guys up who wouldn't talk, and like 3 or 4, and you'd question them. When they wouldn't answer, you'd throw one guy out of the helicopter. So the other guys would go, "Oh my God, I'm next." That was how we got him to talk. It was called a 1,000-foot interrogation. By the way, there's some kind of notice, and I tried to get rid of it on my side. It must be on your end. There's some kind of notice directly across half my page. Can we get rid of that, please?
In the middle, yeah. Yeah, it's driving me crazy too.
I can't get that off
either. It's very irritating.
I'm going to switch over to my big computer. I don't know if a MAD can do that. Yeah, I'm on my iPad.
It's in the studio. It's in the studio.
Oh.
I've been trying to get rid of it. I can't.
Can we move over to one side of it? Can you switch the screen around so it's not in the middle of his face?
Well, anyway, this is audio only, but it's good to see your picture.
Oh, there you are. There, that's good. When you're over there, then you're not in the middle of it.
Hang on, let me move my chair.
There you go.
There we go.
Now we can see you.
It was driving me crazy too.
That's another one. Now there's a team viewer down there in the corner.
Oh yeah.
No, that's not on my computer. I'm on my iPad. I don't have this. This is coming from somewhere else.
From the studio.
Somewhere.
Oh,
anyway, let's keep going.
There we go. The one
there
is
we
gone.
Go. One left and the other one came up.
There we go. So thank God. I'm sorry, that was very irritating.
Crucible.
Thank you.
You wrote a book called Crucible of Shame, Trauma, and Transition. Can you tell us about that book?
That's actually the old title. It was called Trauma.
Okay, new title.
It was called Trauma and Transformation. Yeah, the Crucible of Shame, Trauma and Transformation. I just did a rewrite of it about a month and a half ago, and I'm relaunching the book under a different title. It's called The Crucible of Shame, Healing the Societal. Now I can't remember. Healing the societal roots of addiction and quote mental illness.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do you change this? How do you change a system that makes people murder others and get killed like that? And if you say something, they just shine you on because they don't care about our lives. Mike, I talked to guys that rolled grenades at officers that told them to take the hill next time.
Sure. Yeah, what you were talking about, at least in one instance, was what's popularly called Hamburger Hill. It was actually known as Op-Bia Mountain. It's in northern Icor, and I was there during the early stages of that, and lost a bunch of friends. So, anyway, so the answer to your question is you don't. See, I've gotten to the point where it's kind of like there's a saying that says hatred is like taking poison and hoping somebody else dies. Well, I've gotten to the point in my life where I no longer even try to change the system at all, because it is entrenched and it is driven by deep shame binds, and is driven by profit motive and mandates. And so I choose not to involve myself in that level of dialogue. And so so coming from my personal work, I focus on what is it about me I don't like that I see reflected in this system of fascism and cruelty and cupidity. And so whatever it is I see out there, I know that it exists within me. And so I use the internal. I'm sorry.
What do you?
Well, how are you cruel to yourself, I guess, would then be the question.
Oh. Wow. I grew up in a really violent, alcoholic, chaotic household. And I learned early to internalize self-injury. And part of that was related to internalizing injuring myself was better than getting injured by somebody else. So it took a long time for me to unwind that. And a lot of people think I'm crazy, but I'm 37 years clean from cocaine, and I say thank God for drugs, because drugs saved my life. Drugs saved my life. Because if I hadn't had drugs for all those years, I would have died. I was first suicidal when I was 8 years old. So by the time I finally found drugs, I was grateful because it took me out of the really crappy reality that I lived in, at least for a little while.
Everybody had but it seems like we've worked with thousands and thousands of people, and when someone says, "Oh, I had a great childhood," it's often an illusion. They're just like I saw a great childhood, then I did therapy, and it's like, oh my God, that's what was wrong with my childhoods. I had such a horrible childhood. I rewrote it with a fantasy because that was the only way I could cope.
Yes. Anytime I have a client tell me that, I immediately challenge them, because I've only met two people. I've only met two people in my whole life who truly had a happy childhood. One of them was my
challenged.
Well, I usually do something like just say simply bullshit. That's not. I do. I just say that's not true. I don't believe you. And then people also, of course, want to argue with me about, well, I worked in the youth authority in Oregon for about 4 years, and as a contract therapist. And one of the things I used to hear a lot was, "Gee, my mother's just great. She's wonderful, except when she drinks, or well, mom's great until Saturday night, and she comes in." One kid actually you could see the scars. She used to hit him with a 2x4, and he'd take his shirt off, and you could see the scars on his back from the 2x4 indents. He'd say, "But she was so great, just when she drank too much, it was like she got crazy, but I loved her anyway. She was a perfect mom. I had a great childhood." And it was like, oh my God. So I was constantly challenging things like that. There's so much that we put on.
There's something really sick in our society that we have generation after generation after generation like this, and then you wonder why our the people at the top are so crazy too. It's just part of this whole society. Is there any way out of this? Any way to ever really resolve this with a individual psychotherapy going to do it? If everybody would agree to go do psychotherapy, would we have a new world?
Well,
if Grandma will, it'd be a bicycle.
Right.
Well, no, I think that if we could, there are so many platforms that I could take here, but if we could do global psychotherapy, it might be the only way to do it. And barring that, which I don't think is going to happen, I think that we're going to have a global collapse, because this whole thing is founded on profit motive and cruelty and damage and violence and war. I was reading somewhere there's been 9,000 wars in the last 3,000 years. So the idea of having a peaceful society does not even really exist. It's a delusion.
Right. There's no nowhere to go. We can't even begin to wrap our heads around. Our science fiction doesn't even take us there. It did kind of in the 60s, Star Trek, but they turned it into Star Wars. So there's always wars, even in our fiction.
Of course.
Wouldn't it be great to do a fictional story where it was peaceful?
Einstein tried to withdraw his support and participation in the Manhattan Project, but the fascist Robert Oppenheimer and Enrico Fermi pushed it through against his wishes because they wanted a bomb.
Yeah.
He wrote Roosevelt and said, I want to withdraw. I don't want you to have my materials. I want to give it back. I don't want to participate any further. And, they, of course, ignored him.
Right.
So
this seems like a meltdown right now, what we're experiencing. But it could get worse. I guess the nukes could come in. But
well, one thing that it could be interesting if enough people realize that we are all in this together. That the physical health and the well-being of everybody affects everybody else. It may be inherent in the crisis that we're now facing, this plague, and we have the technology to fight it, but we have to do it as a unified humanity.
No, technology is part of the problem. Technology has spawned this illness. All disease, I mean, if you look at things as a totality, everything is related to everything else. And our immense disregard for the well-being of the planet and for the well-being of people versus money has driven us right to the very brink of this disease. And this is just another. So remember, the swine flu epidemic and the opioid epidemic and the avian flu epidemic, blah, blah, blah. They've been testing this out. They've been looking for something like this to mobilize the entire planet in fear and to invoke more draconian and fascist methods than ever before. And they're succeeding because they're playing on human frailty and the ability to frighten people, to create or induce hysteria. And they've learned how. They've been pushing this. It was Goebbels who first said, you tell a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. And George Bush Jr. echoed that, and so does Trump. He said that very thing himself, thinking it was original, I believe. So I think that technology is part of the problem.
Everybody realize that the function of government is theft of people's property and lives. That's what governments always do everywhere.
Well, it's all a matter of social control, just like religion. It's all designed to control people. I mean, look at the Catholic Church's bullshit position on birth control and abortion and sexuality. Oh no, you can't have sex. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. Which has been doing, of course, for 2,000 years, but it's a perfect way to, if you control people's sex lives, you control their lives, and you can get them to do any damn thing you want. And government is very much the same. I don't believe, in my research, the last egalitarian government that existed on this planet was the Minoan civilization in Cyprus 8,000 years ago. It was the last equalitarian government we had. And
last society,
the women were in charge, but everybody got a vote, and the women listened to the men. They let them have their say. It wasn't like every government since it's excluded women. How ludicrous it is that it took however many hundreds of years for women to get the vote in this country. How ridiculous. And that's very similar globally, is that we've done women, we've done femininity and make macho, sort of pseudo-macho virtues prominent in order to push the war agenda, in order to push the profit motive. My father's mother and my father's mother did not have the vote when they turned 18. Right.
And that's really weird to think about. That's not that long ago. That's my grandparents, not like my great. No, that's not that long ago. And so
I know.
All the stuff that's going on is the imbalance between the divine feminine.
People still don't have a vote. I'm sorry.
That's true.
Imbalance between divine feminine and masculine. So go ahead. What were you going to say?
I'm saying that people don't have the vote the way that the electors are selected, for example, in the presidential thing. The people never have a vote. It's just these electors who can do whatever the fuck they want.
Oh, honey, don't swear on the radio. We can't use the F-bomb, okay?
So, I agree completely. One of the most ludicrous things that's ever happened is the what's it called? The College of Electors, or the voting college, electoral college. It's so ludicrous. It's so completely stupid and ridiculous. I mean, who needs some kind of garbage institution like that to stand between the people and the truth? But it's we've been taught, oh no, we need these experts. I mean, being an expert myself, I'm critical of experts.
It's obviously something that needs to be abolished, and there's no reason. It's not set in the Constitution. It's not set in stones. There's no reason why. And for a long time, it was very different in different states until they started winner take all. But basically, the way to get around it, Robert Reich says, is everybody, all the electors agree, all the states agree that their electors will go for whoever wins the popular one person, one vote in the end. And if they make a compact to that effect, then you can actually have a president that's elected by the majority of the people.
But the problem is you got to get the electors to agree to it, and it's against their best interest, so they will never agree to it.
That's right.
We're back trying to change the system. No, we're back to talking about changing the system. I don't care. I don't want to change the system. I'm burned out on trying to change the system. I was a revolutionary. I got home from Vietnam. I wanted to blow up the whole damn system as much as I could, and it took me years to quit being enraged and outraged. I'm still outraged, but by all this garbage. I am. I'm still outraged. I saw one of my favorite bumper stickers of all time says, "If you're not outraged, you're not paying attention." So I don't. Yeah, I'm not trying to change the system. Because it's stupid. It's ludicrous. It's like eating 500 pounds of German chocolate cake and trying to say, okay, now I'm comfortable, now I'm soothed, and then you wonder why you gained 50 pounds overnight. It's ridiculous. Now, the external world can never fulfill the internal. Never. It's impossible.
Now, if you change yourself, can you change the world? Can the microcosm reflect the macrocosm and vice versa? Can you actually be effective?
Absolutely.
That's a big solution.
Well, no, that's one of the things we say in Mankind Project: changing the world one man at a time. Because as I change the universe, and everybody I come in contact with is changed because I'm different. If I'm angry and upset and et cetera all the time, then everybody I meet's going to go, oh God, what an angry guy. On the other hand, if I develop a sense of self-love and confidence and courage and comfort and self-supportiveness and well-being, then everybody I come in contact with is going to go, oh my God, it was so nice being around him. Wonder what he's doing. Why does he feel so peaceful? I want to know more about why he's so comfortable with his life. And so that's my goal, is to become a kind of an icon, if you will. I want to be an instrument of change in terms of living my own life in tune with that which I find to be most beautiful and wonderful. And giving thanks, constantly giving thanks and gratitude to the universe. Because, it's taken me all these years and I'm still working on it. I feel like I've just begun my life in many ways. I'm finally having the kind of life I always wanted. And
So,
go ahead.
about that Mankind Project, because I heard about it for since the Tony, right? What was his name? Yeah, Tony.
Which one?
5 years ago. What
Tony
was his
Barrett?
name? He's not from Maui. No, he's from somewhere in the mainland. I think he's in Colorado or something. But that's where I first heard about the Mankind Project. And we were on Lisa Gibbons with him, and he was always taking the high road. And it was a very alive, dynamic show, lots of controversy and fighting. And then there was Tony. He was always calm. And Lisa was just fascinated by him. So she let everybody blow up. And then she goes, okay, Tony, tell us what you want to say. And he would just say this profound wisdom. And, that's how she gave him the last word. She said, okay, we just had this show, but Tony, wrap it up for us. And he did. And I don't know if there's any way to get the show. It was brilliant because, he had been teaching in the Mankind Project.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what this is. What is the Mankind Project? And
so there's a line from Nicholas of Cusa in the 13th century, and he said, "The universe is center everywhere and circumference nowhere." So each of us is a center of the universe. We are a center of awareness and experience and etc. So that if you work on yourself, if you work on healing the things that bother you, if you work on healing the things that harm you, then you will change everything. So, Mankind Project started about 40 years ago by a trio of guys who were the only men showing up in women's empowerment workshops. And they would see like hundreds of women showing up, and they'd be the only 3 guys there. And they would go, "Oh my God, we need something like this for men." And so they rough drafted this weekend. One guy was a literature teacher. The other guy was a combat Marine Corps Purple Heart recipient, and the other guy was can't remember. Anyway, a social worker, and so they rough drafted this weekend for men only, and an immersion weekend for men only, and it was driven in some part by Iron John, the Robert Bly book. And in fact, he was an early supporter, still is a supporter of the Mankind Project. And the idea was to take men out of their normal circumstances and immerse them in a situation or an environment where men could let down their, just open up completely without fear. Without any social nicety, without any, don't curse in front of the women, none of that stuff, but just real gut-wrenching maleness. And to experience their fullness of themselves, and the point that we aim at is becoming the man you always wanted to be, and giving men an opportunity to become the man they always wanted to be by letting go of their fears and their shame and their pain and their anguish and the driven incessance of the crazy society that you have to be something more than you really are. And we've been going, we're now, I think, in somewhere around 60,000 guys globally. I don't know the exact figure, but I know that we're approaching probably maybe 100 countries that we've been in. And
now, how do these men get the ideal they always wanted to be? What is the ideal man? Is there a model or role? Is there an archetype of what a man?
No, not an ideal man. You get to be the man you always wanted to be, the man you always really were, but were afraid to be. So instead of trying to be a big buff bodybuilder who drives an 18-wheeler and punches people out on the weekends, You know, that man might be really seriously afraid of his manhood and might decide, you know, I don't want to do this anymore. And you get a chance to confront yourself, basically, in the loving mirror of other men's eyes. And so you get to let down, you get to let go all the illusion. I mean, that's it. And
as women, we have to try to do leadership roles, and we have to show up as men. and they'll, even to be considered like president, you know, like Hillary, she had to wear a pantsuit all the time. We can never be
but that's part of the garbage. That's part of the garbage ideology. Because every man has a, so, you know, it's very Jungian. Every man has an anima, every man has an inner woman, every woman has an animus, an inner man. It's where the other parent disappears to. If you have a female body, you have a male inner body. If you have a male body, you have an inner female body. The other parent doesn't just disappear, they're incorporated into our psyche. And so part of the I'm calling it a garbage ideology because it is, that we live in a society that promotes violence, it promotes addiction, it promotes dysfunction, it encourages violence and war, it encourages racism and sexism and ableism, and etc. Because it makes profit from everything. It's all driven by profit. It is not driven by heartfulness. And that's to me is the key issue here. Anytime you have any kind of situation, no matter if it's 2 people or 2,000 people that are driven by an ideology that puts profit before people, it's doomed.
All of it rests on an ideology even deeper of hierarchy, that some people are more entitled or better than or others and can tell others what to do on it. And so that's basically this rigid status differentiation, which is just a lousy system.
Well, there's a whole section in Crucible on social Darwinism, and I talked at length about social Darwinism, how it developed, like how the eugenics movement came out of it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things grew out of that delusional ideology. A friend of mine said to me the other day, it was really interesting. She said, they say that much like the Buddha sitting under the bo tree, in your final, as it were, quote, final lifetime, the final initiation, no, what she said was the final initiation is a lifetime in which you come to realize that being a prince or a pauper doesn't make any difference. It's all the same. It's all one. And I really resonated with that because I have had at times, especially under the influence of massive doses of LSD and other psychedelics and cocaine and blah blah, that I have had very grandiose delusional fantasies at times, feeling that I was deficient and unworthy and not lovable. Excuse me. And not lovable, which drove me to extremes. And trying to be good enough, because I felt like I had to earn love. And so I drove me to extremes. And one of the planks, let's call it, of this insidious ideology is that women are less valuable than men, and that you have to compete on a male platform. You have to compete in a male environment. I'm not saying that isn't actually true on some levels, but by trying to be more like men, I think that women have done themselves a disservice generally across the board.
What do in the Mankind Project do with people that kind of in a decline gender-wise are not really? It might be a feminine man or a masculine woman. How do you work with people that aren't really in the normal view of what a man is? Are they reject? It might be a feminine man. It might be on the verge of trans. How do you deal with those people?
Not only on the verge, I've staffed weekends with transgender women, or transgender men. I don't know which way you want to put that. transgender. Now, how does that work? Yeah, I guess they would be transgender men. Yeah, female become men. Female to male.
Be women, right?
Yeah, female to male, and a staff with lots and lots of gay people and all kinds of configurations of any kind of hetero to homosexuality that exist. And the bottom line is that we're all warriors here. We're all here to grow and change, and on some levels, we are the protectors of the Aina. We are the warriors of the earth. We are here to protect and defend our grandmother. And all of the rest of that, and all the rest of these superficial qualities are simply nonsense.
That's wonderful. Sasha, what do you want to comment, question?
Well, just to say, I like what you're saying. It sounds cool. Sounds neato.
Yeah, we've worked with trans people, gay, bi, everything you can think of, and it's very interesting. The different perspectives, and people, they sometimes are one end of the continuum, and then they go through the other, and it's all the above. But everybody's valuable, and everybody has worth, and
yeah. Well, and go ahead.
I was just saying the plumbing's irrelevant,
Oh, absolutely. Well, no, it's your heart. It's your heart that matters. And it's like John Lennon said, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. And so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's like we used to say in Vietnam. There is no black blood. There's no white blood. Everybody bleeds green. You're laying there dying, and they plug you into an IV some black guy's blood. You're not going to say, "Oh hell no, I don't want that." Well, I mean, I guess there were cases when people did do that, but it's either get a transfusion or die. You're not going to sit there and debate whose blood it is. So. I think that, but I see we have this rampant ideology that's been promoted by the power brokers for hundreds, at least thousands of years. There's a great book by Ann Miller. Not Ann Miller. What was her name? God darn it. Prisoner of Childhood. His original title was Prisoner of Childhood, and they renamed it The Drama of the Gifted Child. What's her first name? I can't remember her first name. Anyway, she's dead. Swiss psychoanalyst, a beautiful, wonderful woman. Big influence on John Bradshaw and Pia Mellody and that whole generation. Anyway, so one of the things she said was, though, that there's been this prominent ideology that's been pushed. And she tracks it to the beginning of the 15th century, I believe, when children should be seen and not heard, and corporal punishment was common in schools, and blah, 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 enforcing the ideology that might makes right. And I think it goes a lot further back than that. I mean, the Roman Empire was so corrupt and so violent and so duplicitous. There's a great quote from Juvenal in 55 BCE. He said, the famous quote about bread and circuses. He said, the government is corrupt, the infrastructure is falling apart. Cicero talked about this too. And he said, and the people are content to have bread and circuses as long as we keep people distracted. As long as we keep people distracted and have enough minimum food to eat, and they're distracted enough, they will not bother us. They will not bother us in building the kind of fascist government we want. And they will not prevent us from becoming extremely rich to the detriment of everybody else.
And it repeats itself to this day.
God.
And then we get
absolutely
fix the system again. We keep going around from the personal to the global to the how do we do this? Yeah.
Well, it is a spectrum. It is a spectrum, and the only part of that. See, when I came to, I'm clean 37 years, and what I finally came to was that I have no power over the system. I can't change the system, not a whit. The only thing, Rumi spoke to this. You know, he said he tried, I can't remember the exact, I can't quote it exactly, but he said something to the effect of, I tried to change the world and I found that I couldn't. So I decided to try to change myself, and everything changed. So, you know, that was in the 11th century, so, or 11th century. So, you know, there is perennial wisdom, and it's all around us. But we're so often
what they're trying to do is they're trying to prioritize where these.
Sorry, I close some screens. Okay, keep going.
No, I'm sorry. I'm trying to go ahead.
Hello? I was trying to close screens. My computer finally came back, so I was trying to close some screens.
So basically, the rageful parts of us, what they really need is love and respect and feelings of oneness with others. And as we can do that for ourselves, we need to look at the part of ourselves that needs to take effective action. And effective action sounds like it's not doing anything, accepting what is and talking about it. And I think what you're doing is through your books, where you get to share your wisdom in an artistic way that grips people, but is letting them feel their oneness with one another and their internal oneness. That's what I'm getting.
Yes, and I validate tears. I validate men crying. I validate all human beings experiencing their grief honestly, experiencing their fear and their shame and their pain, and honestly admitting, I'm afraid. You know, not being afraid of saying, God, I'm afraid of dying, or I'm afraid of getting hurt, or whatever. It's a suppression of emotions. It's a suppression of energy that leads to all of things we call diseases. They are, in fact, diseases.
Yeah, one of the things I find is that instead of repressing fear, if you say what's motivating the fear, and it seems to me that the function of fear is to get you to pay attention. And if you don't take it to an erotic stage, it's impossible to do without fear, that initial attention call. What is it that I should pay attention to? And same with anything. It's like you don't, when you, I think in my way of looking at things, when you transcend something, you don't get rid of it. When you transcend your pride, you just balance pride with humility rather than get rid of all pride and so forth.
Yes. Well,
and what we need to watch out is that we don't demonize those that are in power as non-human, for they too, we are their disowned parts, and they need us just as much as they are disowned. They are our disowned greediness, and we are their disowned humanity. And so there's a way to meet, I think, anybody.
Yeah, this is very much in tune with Wilber's cosmology, where he talks about the great nest of beingness, and that every junior holon has a corresponding senior holon, and as you fill the function of the lower level of energy, you automatically incorporate that into the next level of energy. Don't throw it away or get rid of it, quote, but you incorporate it and you grow off of it, and it becomes fuel for your next part of your journey.
Exactly. Wow, that's beautiful summary. Thank you.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah.
So we have, before we come up on a break, then we're going to have a 5-minute break, and we'll be back to the second half of the show.
Okay.
So what would you like to cover in the next 2 minutes before the break?
Oh my God.
Just
can I plug?
Give it a cliffhanger. We're going to cover this in the second half.
Okay. Well, I want to plug my book a little more, because the first part describes how we got here and the nature of society and the nature of trauma and delusion and belief systems and et cetera, addictions. The second half of the book, which is most exciting for me, is it's called Beyond. Oh God, here I go. It's beyond norms. And what I talk about is the possibility of an ecstatic society, and how that might come about through personal work.
That's exciting. To me, I like the first half of the show, going to the dark stuff, but by this, at least the last end of the second half of the show, got to be some things that can uplift us and give us hope and show us what to do, how to do it.
I bet you're not do just that. You're showing us paths.
Well, yes, because I've walked them myself. I don't advertise anything I haven't done myself. And I don't advertise anything I wouldn't do myself. And so, I promote, voice dialogue, for example, because I believe that it's incredibly efficacious, and I think it's a wonderful work.
Okay, with that, we're going to be back in 5 minutes. So thank you for listening, everybody. We'll be back in.
Yeah.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
We're in a narco-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a civil majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do? Bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another
extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
trouble.
Come on.
My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse, and I started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix. You got feedback again? No, looks good. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as the Mad Painter. And we're here on Revolution Radio, Studio B. We always get a little bit of feedback when we come back, so I'm just kind of slowing it down. And we're here with, what was it, Stefan? What was it?
Stefan.
Yeah, Stefan Malecek. He's wonderful Malaiite, just like Janet and Sasha. We're all from Mali, and I think we've met each other, but haven't. It's fun to find people in your same island.
Yes.
So before we get back, I'm going to do our little commercial. So please, everybody, go over to revolution.radio, and at the top there is a tab on the left-hand side, and make your donation. We really appreciate your donation. That helps us stay in the air. And there's also a to our Patreon, and you can set up a recurring donation and shoot that. It's your donation. Help us bring you these shows. Alrighty. So, Sash, what would you like to say before we bring Stefan back in for part 2?
Okay, well, we're going to explore how this book has evolved, what it means to you, and how you got it. I find every time I rewrite something, I know so much more than when I first wrote it, and I'm appalled at how poorly written it is.
Sounds like you have an inner critic.
I use my inner critic. It helps me. I'm friends with my inner critic. It shows me what I need to integrate.
Yes.
So tell us about your new book. You said you have a story behind that that you want us to know.
Okay, so when I was working on my doctoral dissertation, Jeannie Achterberg, who was still living then, was my chair of my committee. And so I would, we would have these teleconferences. I had two people in California, somebody in Oregon, somebody in, New York, in New York or Ohio, I can't remember, somewhere back east anyway. And so we'd have these teleconferences and we get into these big, conversations, I'm going to call it conversations, about what was and was not acceptable. And at that point, they kept saying 120 pages plus references. And I go, but that's impossible. I can't even get the introduction done in 120 pages. And so I submitted like a 563-page document about which I immediately got a phone call saying no, nothing else, just no. I'm like, what do you mean no? Well, it's too long. I said, well, look at here. In 1977, A.B. Schmookler had 7 PhDs on his committee, and he submitted a 1,600-page draft that was approved. And there was this long silence on the phone, and Jeannie says, Stefan, this is not UC Berkeley, and you are not A.B. Schmookler. So she said, look, and by this point, she'd probably published a dozen books, and she said, or more, I don't know. Lots of research papers, I know, hundreds. And she said, look, the same thing happened to me when I was, had my first publication contract. She said, so what I started doing was saving something, anything they told me to take out, I just said, okay, fine. I agreed. I took it out, and I put it in this file called Deleted Darlings. I was like, oh, thank you. So I started doing that. And by the time a year or so later, I'd finally gotten a draft of my dissertation approved, I had, 400, maybe more than 400, less than 500 pages of material that they had asked me to take out for brevity. And they kept saying, well, this is not your magnum opus. This is your doctoral dissertation. Do you want to graduate? And I was like, God, okay. So, so when I got my PhD in 2006, and I immediately launched into sorting out this 400 pages of documents, because I knew I had a book in here somewhere. And let me see, the current version, I believe, is 12 or 15, version 15, I believe. I don't remember now anymore. I've lost track. I've rewritten it so many times since I keep coming to greater clarity, and it's a great line from Anna East Nin. She used to say, we are not writers, we are rewriters, and so it's,
yes.
It's really funny for me when I meet people and they say, well, yeah, I've written this book. I go, oh, really? What version are you on? Well, what do you mean? I just told you I wrote a book. I said, no. What version are you on? How many times have you read it? I'm not adding it. This is holy. This is the word of God or something. I'm like, oh my God, please, give me a break. My first novel called Crazy Tales about my experiences in Vietnam and psychiatry. I wrote, I think 25 versions over 36 years before I finally said enough, And I probably at some point, if I had the ease and the largesse to do it, I might even go through it and rewrite it again. But, because it's always changing, clarity changes everything. And so, but anyway, so I ended up, taking all this mishmash of, it took me about a year really to go through the 400 pages the first time, and kind of get them reordered and started creating categories and subheadings and blah, blah. And then I retired in end of 2013. I closed my private practice, and I came to Maui. And my whole point was like, I've been waiting my whole life to have a chance to write without having to be interrupted or having to work for a living or anything. So I've been writing full time for about 6 years now, and I'm so grateful because in the last 6 years. So I wrote several more versions of Crazy Tales, and then I rewrote the second book of the series called Spirals of Time. I rewrote that several times. And then Unwitting Witnesses, about a murder on a locked psychiatric unit witnessed by a schizophrenic woman and nobody believes her. That's the third book of the series. Anyway, but I've been writing ever since. I think I guesstimating that I've written 1 million words in the last 6 years. So,
wow.
Yeah, and it all spun.
What have you published?
Well, I've self-published all of them. The seventh one, I'm working on the seventh one right now. The sixth book will be, my media person's putting it up right now, simultaneous with relaunching Crucible. I have a little giveaway book that I wrote too, a little 25-page pager based essentially on Crucible. It's kind of a teaser for Crucible. So she's launching that. We're going to launch that probably in the next 10 days. And then she's also working on my sixth book, which is called Excelsior. Excuse me. And so I've published them all myself. And I had an intuition the other day. I really listened to my dreams and my intuitions. And my intuition told me the other day that this book that I'm working on, the seventh novel, I'm about 400 and something pages into it. Closing in. On the end, it'll be less than 500. But my intuition said that this could be my breakthrough book because, somewhere down the line, a lot of times people who are serious writers, write 5 or 6 books, and then somebody picks up the 5th or 6th book, and then all of a sudden they go, "Do you have anything else?" And then they publish their whole catalog. So that's my fantasy. It's the current fantasy I'm operating off of. Is somebody's going to like my 7th book and publish my catalog. So, yeah. But well, I mean, but the main thing is, and I love Crucible so much, just so much, because if I were granted the opportunity to teach graduate school, I would use that as a textbook because it says everything that I want to say, and it incorporates everything that I've learned in 50 years in psychiatry and everything I've learned about personal healing and everything I've learned about energy work and everything I've learned about, well, it's my life. It's my whole life. It's very, and, the bulk of the content of all my novels is autobiographical. I follow in Henry Miller. He's my hero. I follow and Sylvia Plath and, all the people, all the autobiographical novelists, and that's who I identify with. And, I remember when I was a kid, I was 8 years old, and somehow, I don't know how, I remember the image. The image is very, very clear to me. Somehow, it was like a Saturday morning, early in the morning, and I woke up and I was depressed and upset, and I just started crying, and I threw my hands in the air, and I said, please help me. I want to be an instrument of the universe. And I had no idea what I was talking about. But I still say that, I still feel, a lot of times my images, people say, well, blah, blah, blah. How do you write books? And I go, I don't. What do you mean you don't write books? I said, no, books write me. I feel like an Old Testament prophet, and I'm sitting down on some mountain somewhere and God is whispering in my ear. Of course, a lot of people who don't, who aren't, professional writers think that's completely nuts. And I hear people tell me, anybody could be a writer.
You gotta watch out for the one. You gotta watch out for the one that says to kill your kid.
Oh well,
God that talks.
Oh, the God that talks to you. Oh, the God that talks to
you.
Yeah.
Well, I've learned to differentiate. Mainly because I've been fortunate enough to. And you can call it religiously delusional or not, but I've been fortunate enough to have had divine intervention in my life at very critical times. Usually when I'm at the 59th minute of the 11th hour getting ready to jump in front of a train, Divine Mother appears, and speaks to me. Several times when I've been, imminently on the verge of suicide, she showed up and And you can say I was hallucinating, but I'll tell you to the day I die that I know not. Especially like when I was 1982, when I was kicking cocaine and been having a really, really, really hard time. I was struggling. I was like, I had no money, no connections. Nobody would give me not even a grain of cocaine. People who I used to give thousands of dollars worth of stuff to on consignment, wouldn't give me a line, and had no money, no job, barely having a place to live. And I had woken up from, what I call my drug-induced coma, because I would sleep 16 or 18 hours a day. I was so exhausted after having had a $1,000 a day habit. And this is $1982. Yeah, $1982. And I was struggling to get into my clothes, and I said, I'm going to go score. I don't know how, I don't know where. I got to have some cocaine. And this voice spoke to me out of the corner of the room and said, if you use again, you're going to die. And I was like, come on. I didn't want to believe it. I was like, this can't be true. But it confused me enough that I fell back into bed and slept some more. And then I woke up again. I was going through the same ritual, and I was trying to get my pants on. I couldn't even get my pants on. I was so unstable. And and this voice said, if you use again, you're going to die. And I was like, oh my God. At which point I just started sobbing, and I threw my hands in the air and I said, please help me, please help me.
What was the voice like? What did she sound like? What makes you identify it as she?
Immensely feminine and melodious and filled with love and nurturance and comfort and compassion. Just swept through me. This immense compassion swept through me, and I knew I was in the divine presence. There was no way around it.
Wow.
There's just times. I've always had a truth sense. I always know when somebody's lying to me, for example. I've always known. And as soon as I heard, I guess maybe even the first syllable that came through, I knew that I was in divine presence. There was no question about it. It was so completely real and whole and powerful and honest and gentle and kind, all at the same time, and filled with compassion, and filled with this.
And you had a kinesthetic response. Your body was responding to this voice.
Oh God, yes. She spoke to my heart completely, to my soul. There was no way. It wasn't like listening to words. It was like music coming into my heart. It was absolutely amazing, and it wasn't and the thing is, that wasn't the first time that I'd had this visitation. In 1970, I was having a very, very hard time, and considering I had just written a death poem, and I was getting ready to, God, I hadn't planned on going here. I apologize if this is, a little too heavy.
This is perfect. It's perfect.
But I had just written a death poem called Guru, and I was just finishing up the poem, and I was going to stab myself in the heart with an X-Acto knife, and this voice came and said, "You're not allowed to do that. There's still work for you to do."
Wow.
Yeah.
It's cool. Just take the time to feel it now. It's okay. Just feel it, baby.
Yeah. No, it cracked me. So instead of being angry and full of hatred and shame and self-pity and blah, blah, I just started crying. I couldn't stop crying. I cried for probably an hour after that. I just couldn't stop. It was so filled with, it was weird. It was gratitude, and I was still angry. I was angry that I'd been prevented from, quote, leaving, but at the same time, I was filled with gratitude and wonder and this incredible validation, that somehow the very heart of the universe cared enough about me to show up when I needed it. Which has not always been my experience in life. Is that people showing up.
Is that presence with you still? Is that always with you now, or is that external?
Always is a big word, Sasha. I couldn't say always. I mean, I think if I were to say always, I would have to say that I'm an illuminated soul, and I don't do that. But I would say that some sense of presence is with me almost always, yes. And the times I need to reach for it or remember that I'm not cut off and isolated and et cetera. And sometimes I have, huge, I have these awakenings, I had an experience, in fact, this past Monday. Was it Monday? Yeah. Jesus, seems like months ago. But I had this, I was talking to a dear friend of mine in LA, and I said something about, when I had my first near-death experience when I was 13. And she said, well, I don't think you've ever told me about that. I said, oh, well, I don't really talk about it very much, blah, blah, blah. And so I launched into telling her about this traffic accident I had when I was 13, and I introduced my face to the back end of a station wagon at 30 miles an hour on a bicycle. And, I had 2 plastic surgeries in 1960, and then I had 2 more in 1963 to repair the damage when it all abscessed. And they said, if I'd hit a half an inch lower, I would have died instantly. So it was like, that was the only difference between life and death at that point, was a half an inch. And because they were afraid I might aspirate, they wouldn't give me a general anesthetic, so I had to stay awake during all the surgeries. And so I started recounting this to her, and I've only told the story a few times in my life, and I started recounting it to her, and all of a sudden, about 20 minutes into it, I said, oh my God, I can feel my feet. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I've been dissociative most of my life, and when I'm in my body, I can feel my feet. And I feel a blood flow. And so for the last week now, I have every single day been aware of, I can feel my feet. I can point out at least 5 different places in my feet where I have pulses, and I can feel the blood flow in my feet. So, it was a huge, release, a recapitulation, a true abreaction, and the cathartic effect has stayed with me all week. And I don't expect that it's going away this time. I feel so much more embodied now than I've ever been. And gee, it only took 60 years.
You had surgery. Do you know what they used? When I had nose surgery and I had to be awake, they used liquid Valium intravenously and cocaine up my nose.
For what?
I had to have operations on my nose, and I had to be awake.
Yes,
I had
of course.
polyps in the nose and a deviant septum. So
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just
No, of
wondering
course.
if they, any connection with your addiction later.
No. So I had a fractured maxima. I fractured my maximal bone in several places. I knocked all my teeth out, broke my nose.
Oh my God.
And so they took me into surgery, and they tied me down to the gurney. They put straps across my ankles and my thighs and my chest, and more or less handcuffed me to the gurney, and then put a big like nun's cowl around my face. And what they gave me was repeated injections of xylocaine. This is 1960, so they gave me repeated injections of xylocaine, and they kept saying, and I remember so clearly, this guy would take the osteotome, and he would tap on what was left of my maxilla, and he'd say, "Does that hurt?" I'd start screaming. I said, "God damn, it hurts like hell, man." "Oh, okay, well, let's give him some more anesthetic." And no, it gave me more xylocaine. And I remember I counted the number of injections I had, and I ended up passing out after the 25th injection. I just couldn't stand the pain any longer. Wow. And so, yeah, and I found out subsequently that I have all kinds of strange extra body parts. Like I have extra nerves in my toes. They're called supernumerary nerves. I have extra nerves in my face, in my gums, because every time I go for dental work, they have to give me like 3 or 4 times more than they give anybody else, because they have to make like twice as many injections, because I have all these spots where I have nerves that most people don't. And then in 2004, I had pneumonia, and they sent me to a pulmonologist, and he did films of my chest. And I have what's called an accessory bronchus in my right lung. Most people have one bronchus to their lung. I have 2. Mm-hmm. So I have all these like extra body parts and stuff. So it's not unusual to me that, through the course of my life, I've always done more drugs, drank more alcohol, eaten more food, et cetera, than most normal people. So anyway, but I didn't know that at the time. All I knew was that I was in extreme pain and they wouldn't listen, and I had to keep begging for more meds. And they wouldn't give me any kind of narcotics. They wouldn't give me any kind of general anesthetic. They wouldn't give me anything other than xylocaine. They kept saying, "Okay, more xylocaine, more xylocaine." I'm like, oh my God.
It's really strange. Because I had surgery in the 60s, and they were always giving me cocaine. I had 5 or 6 operations on my nose, and I was a young child, and under 15, and it was 11 or 12.
Yeah.
When they first started operating, they'd always give me cocaine. So,
cocaine.
But I didn't get addicted.
Cocaine
up my nose.
Is the anesthetic of choice for nasal and ocular surgery.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Freud loved it.
Yeah, he did. Well, he was actually paid a great deal of money to tout injecting cocaine as the cure for morphine addiction.
Oh.
He was paid a great deal of money. Another interesting piece about that was, we talk about, quote, the heroin epidemic or the opioid epidemic. In 1899, when Bayer and Company invented heroin, they sent out 100,000 packets of heroin around the globe to doctors to encourage them to give it to their patients free for all kinds of things like coughs and, quote, female problems and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was the drug of choice for many, many years prior to 1914 when the Harrison Narcotics Act came in. But
wow.
Yeah, Bayer and Company actually were responsible for first synthesizing heroin.
Yay, Bayer.
I think their aspirins are poisonous too, ultimately.
Tell it to the willow trees, That's where you get acetyl salicylic acid is from the bark of willow trees.
Yeah.
But I talk about all of this in great detail in the book too. All of it is a background to how we got here, because to me it's important to understand how we got here and why. I mean, I could have just about. I'm sorry.
How did we get here and why? Summarize.
Oh, Jesus.
Gee.
How did Big Pharma get in control of everything?
Anyway, just a brief thing. We have a half an hour.
I can tackle different parts of that question, but essentially, the rise, even before the Industrial Revolution, the rise of ancient, the replacement of ancient technologies like yoga, for example, with modern technology, quote, like machines and such. The rise of the machine eliminated. Oh God, I do a whole piece on the nature of the world of time. In economic theory, one person can only produce one person's energy. But if you get 100 people doing the same thing at the same time, you're getting 100 people, 100 times the energy, all focused at the same time. So the world of time shifts with the amount of technology that you apply. And so one of the things that happened with the rise of the machine is that, was that, instead of giving a shit about what you were doing, about the craft and the quality of what you were crafting, it became a matter of speed and time and production versus quality and love and care. And so the more that happened, the more that people with big money got more money because they could afford to lay people off or enslave people to machines. I was watching this documentary, this is a while ago, but about, I can't remember who it was. Somebody, it was some sweatshop in Southeast Asia, and somebody smuggled a camera in, and they did these mini cams of all these women slaving, 16, 18 hours a day for 80 cents a day. And at one point, this woman ran the sewing needle through her finger and started freaking out, screaming. There was blood everywhere, and the manager or something just came up and cut the strings from the sewing machine and started beating her for getting blood on the material and lifted her up. Yeah, lifted her up and threw out of the factory out into the mud, and opened the other door at the other end of the factory and invited the next person in because they have this huge room full of women waiting just to make 80 cents a day. So that's typical of, and I do a whole piece on the sociopathic business model that was really started with the British East India Corporation. So the guy who, I'm trying to remember his name, I'll remember his name in a minute here. He was the head of the British East India Corporation. He was the governor of India, and he was a general or a field marshal in the army, a commodore in the Navy. So he had control of the entire British Navy. And at that time, he made more money than anybody in the empire, including the Queen. And so he had all of these military forces at his disposal, and he could do just about anything he wanted. Burdett was his name. And and part of how everybody talks about China, being addicts in China, addicts in Southeast Asia, that's bullshit. It started with the British because they were growing hashish and ganja in Pakistan and Afghanistan and in India. And they had an arrangement going where they traded tea for opium. And they wanted China to become addicted so they could sell millions and billions of dollars worth of opium. And the Chinese emperors always refused to allow them to come in. And so Burdett took the British Navy up the Yangtze River and started bombing every single city and coastal installment he could find, blowing them up, just moving up the river, moving up to completely cut off eastern China from western China and isolated. And they kept insisting that all the emperor had to do was agree to start importing opium, and they would stop destroying China, which is what finally happened after a number of years. And they kept Kowloon and the new territories in Hong Kong on that so-called, quote, 99-year lease. In order to stop the emperor, they were killing literally tens of thousands of people weekly. And in order to stop the slaughter, the emperor agreed to start importing opium. And within 10 years, 20 million Chinese were addicted to opium. And this all evolved out of 1841 to 1843 and 1852 to 56. In other words, I'm not sure exactly in those dates, but the British fought a series of wars with France about control of the international drug trade. They were called the Opium Wars, which at that time were worth $5,1843, the equivalent of about 40 or 50 billion dollars now, more than that even. I can't remember. I don't know what the equivalent is now. Anyway, the point being is that they fought this series of wars for control of the drug trade while at the same time promoting slavery. And every single major European nation, Britain, France, the Netherlands, Germany, Italy to some extent, all of them were active slavers. They were all active slavers. And a fellow named Rao, R-A-O, published a series of papers in 2011 that are just so illuminating. And he said, without the slave trade, supported by the drug trade, none of the major European nations would have survived. Their entire economy was based on slavery and drug trade.
You know, it still is.
Yes, it is. It's true. It's true.
Conscription is slavery. Debts are slavery.
Well, yeah. I was thinking more like, female sex trafficking, but yeah.
That too. But it's all there. It's all there.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I could get really depressed if I thought about it too long.
Girl get depressed.
Well, no, but
all right.
But I have heart now. I have a different perspective because I know that I'm making a difference. And whether I get a book contract for $20 million or not doesn't matter. I'm never going to stop writing. I'm never going to stop speaking my truth because I know that I'm right. I've spent so much time researching. Yeah. Well, I've been writing since I was 8 years old. So 68. What was that? 65 years now I've been writing, and it's always been kind of my therapy because it's been the way that I've reached a greater level of clarity, and defined and refined my thoughts. And what I'm promoting now is the distilled essence of my work.
Switch it now to like a positive. Because you said earlier you had positive things you could share with us because we're running out of 10 to 15 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so the second part is.
Let's do another check.
So if you can address the dilemma is I wish to have a more just and partnership-oriented world in a way that doesn't exclude the people that are oppressing us.
That's true, but if there's any multi-billionaires and trillionaires out there listening to this, pay heed because you're going to pay a high price. Because in order for the new world to come, you're going to have to be reduced in status. Period. There's no room in the new world for trillionaires. I mean, see, a trillionaire, a billionaire. I'm sorry.
There's probably a need underneath
attention,
all this.
Affection.
Needs that these billionaires. What are they? It's like a bottomless pit.
Thank you. So good. Exactly. Thank you. So we're talking about the cessation of greed. Now, what is greed?
Yeah.
Greed is an addiction. It's the most prominent addiction there is on this planet, and nobody talks about it. And it's driven by hunger. It's driven by an intimacy hunger, a deep and devastating and pervasive intimacy hunger. I do not feel good enough.
Yes.
If I have more money, women, cars, etc., I will feel okay. Bullshit. It's an addiction, just like every damn other addiction. There's no difference. It's all driven by shame. The shame and fear of not being good enough, of not being lovable, of not being worthy. And if you heal the desire for, the only way to heal the desire for greed is to fulfill your need for self-comfort, to learn how to be your own best parent, for example. I've done a lot of Charles Whitford, the inner child work too, and I have found it extremely valuable. And Bradshaw's homecoming work, I did a workshop with him a long time before he died. But that homecoming work was extremely powerful for me. Welcoming.
In voice dialogue, what's really useful is being able to work with the power chakra so that you can balance the giver and the taker, the follower and the leader. You don't have to. You both are available to you. And it's anytime you push something into the shadow, it erupts later and disrupts your ecology and challenges your relationship with others when it's really just an internal drama.
Yes. When Howard Stern invited his friend Donald Trump to do his family of origin work, he said, Donald, if you just do that, he said, I know how horrendous your childhood was, because he had been on all those interviews with Howard. He said, I've been doing my therapy. I feel great now. He said, I now have an authentic relationship with my children. And if you did this work, Donald Trump, you would have an authentic relationship with, the people in your life, not this facade. That's like,
and he wouldn't be such a misogynistic. He wouldn't be such a misogynistic, sexist jerk either.
And that applies to all of them. Like, what's going on with Bezos and Zuckerberg and all the other ones?
They're all the same. They're all sociopaths. They're all sociopaths. Right. They're all driven by a greed addiction. Because they somehow think that if they have enough of something external that they're going to be worthwhile. Whereas the fact remains that underneath, if you boil all that bullshit facade off of them, they're all cowering little children who are afraid of being beaten or raped again.
Right. So is that because of nature and nurture? Was that genetic or was that a combination of both and how they were raised?
No, it's
in such extreme sociopaths. Go ahead.
No, it's not a matter of it's not a matter of nature. It's really a matter of dysfunctional nurture. No one is born a psychopath. No one is born a rapist or a child murderer. All of these people are made. They're created by psychopathic parenting.
Sure.
And the only way to heal it is to find something. You have to find a safe place to let go of all of that, to experience it, to let it wash through you completely. And it will probably kill some people because it's so overwhelming. But
in the first generation Star Trek, they had the last criminal mind, and so everybody was required to go through psychotherapy, and there was no more criminal mind except the last criminal, and everybody's focused on how do we cure this last person from its dysfunction. So wouldn't that be a great world?
Well,
that's what we do.
But see, the key piece to all of this is you have to want to change. You have to want to heal. I get so many people who come to me, oh, my son's a meth addict. Did you take him as a client? Well, he's still using? Yeah. No. Take him to detox, get him cleaned up. When he's a year clean, you can call me and I'll talk about it. I don't take anybody who's not at least a year clean. Because I know for a fact that until you get a year under your belt, you're very, very, very susceptible. They did a study at UCLA Medical Center, a cadaver study on chronic alcoholics, and they found, and especially relapsing alcoholics, 7.5 months. Alcohol stays in your brain pan for 7.5 months after you quit drinking.
Wow.
Yeah. So just because you stop a few days doesn't mean you're safe. So I tell people all the time, no, I won't take anybody who's not at least a year clean or sober. Period. I have had one offered me $10,000 to do a week psychotherapy with her son who was actively using meth and alcohol. And I said, absolutely no way. No way. Absolutely not. Because the key piece here is the desire to change. And here's where opposition and all this so-called negativity comes in, is that the negativity, the opposition pushes one to want to change, pushes you up against the wall. I've hit the wall so many times with, I used drugs actively for 23 years and I got pushed against the wall so many times, came close to dying, getting shot, stabbed, whatever, ODing, blah, blah, blah. That I finally had to go, I don't want to do this anymore. I had to make a decision. I had to make a choice to quit. And I had to.
So what would be the wall? What would be the wall for these billionaires that are greedy because they're sociopaths? I mean, they're never going to say, "I need help." They're never going to hit a wall so much money they won't reach a wall.
They have to reach a point somehow, and everybody does. This is where I have hope, if you will, is that I know that no addiction can last forever. Addictions are self-destructive by nature, and they are thrown up in the face of overwhelming trauma in order to blunt the trauma. And eventually, because there is a homeostatic process, everyone's body wants to be clean, wants to be clear, wants to be healthy. And I mean, imagine just for a second what horrible thoughts these people have in order to support this habit that they have. Killing people, mowing down rainforests, destroying people's lives, stealing land, et cetera, et cetera. They're filled with awful, awful negativity. And eventually everything comes back. Everything comes back to its source. I'm convinced of it. And eventually everybody has their day. Every dog has his day. And I'm not going to predict anything here, but I'm telling you that within the next few years, we're going to see some heavy, heavy, heavy duty changes. I mean,
okay. So one thing I think about some of the split lack of empathy in the Illuminati is that their children have been subjected to satanic rituals.
Yes.
As part of the rich man's inner circle, and and especially if they live in Long Island, there's government involvement in the awful people that did experiments in Nazi Germany and came over with Operation Paperclip, ran a CIA program and they split people into alters they can control, and they kill a lot of people.
Also Operation Lynchpin was another one. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes.
No, I agree with
you. And so what it is also, there's a basic inability to trust anybody because their supposed beloved parents are the ones that took them to these terrible, horrible situations that you and I have probably deprogrammed several people that have had this stuff, and they can reclaim it all. It's all there, but they've got to, remembering it and catharting it. It really is part of the process.
Yes, it's the only way. I want to recommend, if you've never read it, I can't remember the guy's last name, but there's a series of books called A Boy Called It was the first book.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. His name is Dave something, but he went through the most horrendous abuse that I've ever read about. His parents kept him in a dog kennel. They called him It. They fed him out of dog bowls. He was not allowed to stand. He had to poop in a corner, blah, 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 on and on and on. Horrible, horrible stuff. So he wrote a trilogy in his 40s. The first one was A Boy Called It, something, I can't remember the second one, and the third one was called A Man Called Dave. And
far out.
Yeah. Very, 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 very powerful. Very hopeful. And he made me cry practically every chapter. It was so powerful. I've never read about such horrendous abuse in my whole life. But it's hopeful because, and see, it's like, I don't know how I can do this quickly, but I embody hope. I embody faith. I embody joy. I embody the potential for recovery. You know, and my very life is a monument to recovery, to the hope, to the ability to I don't know, call it be reborn, or to resurrect myself. The word resurrect means, you know, to buy oneself back. And so I consider myself to be a resurrected person.
What made you stop and turn around and become a new person?
Mother Mary came to him.
Mother Mary came to you, yeah.
That
was what you had the vision. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've been very blessed, you know, and I don't think that I'm necessarily, well, I'm by no means the only one. I know all kinds of recovering people who have had amazing stories and et cetera. But I am public. I am open. I am I'm a writer. I've been a writer my whole life, and nothing's going to stop. Nothing's going to stop me.
I know.
Not even Mad Painter. Mad Painter won't stop me.
He's a painter, so he's never going to stop painting.
I bet. Yeah. I'm interested to know what style he paints in. I love abstract expressionism. I get the feeling that he's an abstract expressionist. But you can't see it.
He'll put it in the chat.
In the chat, you can take a look.
Some of his samples.
I was just saying, if you had a camera, you could look over my shoulder. One of my favorite abstract expressionists, collages on the wall behind me here. So.
Yeah, we can see something. Do you want to move aside for a second? We can just very interesting.
Very.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah.
Is that one of yours?
No,
did you paint it, or did?
No. It was done by a friend of mine. I was actually living in his studio. I was his sort of studio assistant at the time when he made this. In fact, I stretched the canvas for this piece, if I recall correctly, in 1983. And I watched it come together, and I begged him for years, I really want that piece. I love that piece, blah, blah, blah. And he kept saying, well, this was in Mill Valley at the time. And he said, well, when you have a place of your own, I will gift this to you as a housewarming present. And so in 1988, I moved into this incredible flat in Lone Mountain in San Francisco, and he came to the party and he brought the painting for me, and I've had it ever since. It's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites. I've been blessed with knowing lots of artists. I have lots of original art in my house, and people that, oops, what's that? Oh God, getting all these kinds of signs flashing up on the screen. So I want to say so much more. Anyway,
we'll have you back again. Sure, we'll have you back.
Yeah, there's a whole section called a partial and incomplete view is one part of it, and then it says there's another part that says toward an ecstatic society. And I really do believe that it's possible to live in ecstasy. Not just individuals, but the entire society. But it has to be a sort of collective, telepathic almost choice. And to do that, you have to be able to be completely honest. In order to be telepathic with someone, you have to be totally honest with that person. And be unafraid of exposing your deepest, darkest fears and shame and hurt and believing that you will be received with love and honor and dignity and compassion. See, and that only comes when you finally clear out enough garbage that you can take the chance to be open all the time. So I tell people all the time, I do not lie, I do not cheat, I do not steal. And that's how I live. That's a code I live by. Like Crosby, Stills, and Nash once said, you who are on the road must have a code that you can live by, and so become yourself, because the past is just a goodbye. And that's pretty much it. You know, you have to become yourself. It takes tremendous work, and I'm not there by any means, but I'm working on it. It's a daily thing. We don't live in a society
that authentic self, that transparency, because you're not known. To know me is to love me, and if you're anything less than that, you're never known. You never loved you. Yeah, that's so right. I learned that through therapy. Last minute. No time. You have 1 more minute. Tell us about your books real quick.
Okay.
You have 6, 7 books.
My website is Stefan, STEFANJ Malecek, MALECEK.com. Check out all my books.
Thank you so much.
Yes, mahalo.
Thank you. Mahalo. Mahalo nililay.
Hey, come to our drum circle on Fridays at Baldwin.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
On the go? Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons. Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply, though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. Get a pen. Here's the number. Studio A is 712-432-6958, and Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Barbara Jean Lindsay, the Cosmic Oracle. If you have questions about your past lives or future plans, need answers from the cosmos about your love life or career, or just want to keep your finger on the pulse of the planet, check out my show, The Cosmic Oracle, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. We will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at spacedoutradio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
Hello, Karl Marx here. Look at my wonderful hair. Notice how I sweep it back.
Karl?
I call it the 360 sweep. Beard, sideburns, and the magnificent coif.
Karl!
What? Was is this?
You're on the radio. They can't see you.
Oh, yeah. I get confused.
Want to learn more about the Marxist agenda and other important stuff? Listen to The Ultimate Remedy with L.B. Bork, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on Revolution Radio.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and